So, I know that Answers in Genesis is Paul Geo's territory. I know that. But they retweeted an old take that they had 6 years ago on why God makes viruses. God makes viruses. That is the way that they worded it. And I figured that, given that that is one of the most tone-deaf things you can possibly do in the middle of a pandemic, here we are. We're going to talk about it. But first, we need to talk about fan art. So first we have from Ikakus, everything is so much, and it is always happening. Yeah? No? Not untrue. Not untrue. And then we have another one from ROD, the nutty-ass goober, said that they were experimenting. And we have... I understand that Next Generation killed the stigma of red shirts dying first, but also, why do you want me to die first? Just throwing that out there. Anyway, as always, thank you all for your fan art submissions. If you want your fan art to be shown on any particular episode, please drop it into the fan art section of the Discord. And with that, let's go ahead and get into this very, very tone-deaf article. Not tone-deaf for when it was written. Well, I guess we'll see. But certainly tone-deaf to be retweeting it now, of all times. Alright. So, why did God make viruses? I'm going to have to read this in my best interpretation of a Ken Ham voice. That was done by Dr. Gene Leitner. Well, you still get the Ken Ham voice. You still do. If God created everything good and with a purpose, why are there disease-causing bacteria and viruses in the world? There are some fundamental differences in how creationists and evolutionists view life. Biblical creationists believe that God created various forms of life, according to their kinds, with the ability to reproduce and fill the earth. This view includes the concept that God had purposes in what he created, and that he originally created was very good. In contrast, evolutionists view life as all descending from a single common ancestor, by chance processes. Evolutionary arguments tend to imply that life isn't very well complex or well designed. So, no. Evolutionary arguments definitely argue that life is complex. And it does not argue that it is well designed. That is true. But yeah, no. Life being complex is kind of like a linchpin of evolutionary theory. Because the diversification and the complexity of life is literally what evolutionary theory is analyzing. That's what it's doing. For example, 100 years ago, a cell was promoted as being nothing more than a blob of protoplasm, implying that it wouldn't be difficult for it to rise by chance. This proved to be wrong. Cells are incredibly complex structures. Okay, so again, if you are going to use anything against like the theory of evolution, maybe not grabbing from 100 years ago, just throwing that out there. At one time, evolutionists argued that organs or structures with no known function actually had no function. At the time, this included hundreds of organs and structures in the human body. Instead, these were believed to be vestiges of evolution. This argument has become rather vestigial itself, as these organs have been found to have function. Yes. Because here's this lovely thing about science that happens. I know this is written by Dr. Gene Leitner, and was featured in the New Answers book, but I'm just going to go ahead and say Ken. Because this is all Ken Ham's baby. So, Dr. Gene Leitner, as endorsed by Ken Ham, you do understand that science progresses forward, right? So, when we find information, when we find things to be incorrect, when we have a less complete understanding of something, science has this tendency of updating itself. Yet, this argument reappears in genetics. Most of the DNA in our body does not have code for proteins, so it was labeled junk DNA by evolutionists who assumed it had no function. As research continues, it is becoming clear that this DNA has numerous essential functions. The evolutionary worldview has a dismal track record for anticipating the astounding complexity of life in life uncovered by scientific research. So, first of all, Gundam Geen, thank you very much for the follow. Thank you. Secondly, evolution also has a very, very good track record of making predictions when it comes to how things are structured, what we would expect to find with how particular animals are built internally. The idea that there are certain claims, like junk DNA, based on information that we do not yet understand or based on information that is currently incomplete, the fact that science has actually taken that information and revised it over time, that is a point in science's favor. And these are all things that add into evolutionary theory. Also, how's it going, Hanako? How is it going in chat? For everybody who has not yet followed Hanako, Ichigoma in chat, you should definitely do so. Highly, highly recommend for the incredibly wholesome Strawberry Dragon content. Continuing on with the incredibly tone-deaf article, let's go ahead and look into the creationist puzzle bit. Because we know what a virus is. We know that viruses are made of DNA and RNA. We know that they're not generally considered living. I want to see when they get to the point where they say why viruses are created. Because again, remember, they retweeted this thing in the middle of a pandemic. The biblical record tells of a global flood when all created kinds of unclean land animals were reduced to a population of 2, the pair that was preserved with Noah on the ark in Genesis. Alright, so, first of all, let's go ahead and get, like, the really basic shit out of the way. If you only have 2 animals, and you try to create a shit ton of animals off of only those 2 animals, you will bottleneck their genetics. You will engage in so much inbreeding that you are going to have cross-eyed, problematic variants of animals going forward. You can't just bottleneck a species like that and expect it to continue functioning. It's not how it works. After the flood, these animals reproduced and filled the earth again. Again, genetic bottlenecking happened at that point. Yeah, Noah's Ark is Alabama. That's what it is. Noah's Ark is Sweet Home Alabama, where, well, you keep it all in the family, you hear? At 2, the species is effectively extinct. Yeah, pretty much. Because, here's the thing. If you only have 2 people and you're trying to repopulate... If you have 2 human beings, and you are repopulating a world with those 2 human beings, after about 4 or 5 generations, you will eventually just have complete infertility. You do not have enough diversification. Diamond Flawed, thank you very much for redeeming your points, friend. Fucking weirdo. And yeah, if you have less than 50, a species dies out to genetic disease. Because all it takes, if you have only 2 people, everybody has susceptibility to different diseases. There are different diseases that affect you more or less depending on how your body is structured. If you have only 2 people, all it takes is the right disease hitting you, and you're out. You're done. You're fooked. And because there is not enough diversification within your species, every single offspring that you have will have the exact same chance of surviving that same deadly virus. 0. 0. Nothing. Y'all die. Welcome home to sweet Alabama. We're gonna all get on the ark now, and we're gonna have cousin daddies. Gwitham was gonna say, Animal Alabama! Yeah, we've lost entire cultures of bananas that way. Because we didn't have genetic variants in them, because we cloned them. After the flood, these animals reproduced and filled the earth. Today, many of these kinds are represented by whole families. For example, the dog family is believed to represent a created kind. Technically, okay, so is believed to represent a creative kind. What is your source on this one? T.C. Wood, The Current State of Baraminology from Creation Research Society. No, you can't use those fucking sources! Those are not properly peer-reviewed! Holy shit! Your source is not actually a fucking peer-reviewed scientific source. Your citation is wrong. Jesus Christ! He can't help us now, though, to be fair. To be fair. There are foxes that are adapted to living in the Arctic, and others that live in the desert. Yes, that is evolution. That is exactly how that right there. That adaptation. That is evolution. Ken, my friend, who didn't write the article, definitely endorsed it. That's what it is. That's what an evolution is. There's incredible variety seen in modern domestic dog breeds. Where did all this variety come from? GMOs. Dogs are genetically modified organisms. We literally bred them for specific purposes. The mutations that come up as a result of all of this breeding? Evolution. Literally, the diversification of dogs is accounted for within the theory of evolution. How could it arise so quickly given the flood occurred roughly 4,300 years ago? Well, here's the trick. It didn't happen 4,300 years ago. Okay, so there is not actually evidence for a global flood happening 4,300 years ago. There is an event with an ice cap. I can't remember what it's called, but there's an event that somewhat locally resembles what a global flood could have been. But a global flood in the way that it is described in the Bible, we don't have an account of that. Moreover, 4,300 years ago, there are civilizations that are older than 4,300 years. We have civilizations that are older, that we can find relics of, that existed before your flood. Oh my god. Let me just go ahead and say the thing that debunks this. We have radiometric dating, okay? And radiometric dating is used to analyze the age of the Earth. Radiometric dating as opposed to carbon dating. Carbon dating has an upper limit of, what, 53,000 years? Something like that? 40,000 years? Somewhere around there. Carbon dating can only go back so far. Radiometric dating can go back much farther, as there are very different and multiple different things we can look at with their half-lives. When we are looking at the half-lives of various elements, when we are doing our radiometric dating, we have a larger swath of them we can look at that go back much farther than, well, your flood is supposed to have taken place in. Like, you need to demonstrate that there was a global flood before you start making this claim. And I already know exactly how Ken Ham is going to try to demonstrate it. He's going to demonstrate it by saying that he has a book, because that's what he did during his debate with Bill Nye. Literally, the exact thing that he did is say, well, I have this book. Yes, Ken, we get it. You have a very nice book. I have a book, too. I have several books, in fact. But none of them prove that the Earth is 6,000 years old. Not to mention, you know how they actually got to the 6,000-year-old mark with the world? Do you know how creationists got there? Just asking, real quick. They got there by looking at the ages purported of all of the characters in the Bible and adding those ages up. Literally, they added the ages of fictional characters together to come to the conclusion that the Earth was 6,000 years old. That's how they did it. Genealogy. That is not a scientific way of determining the age of a planet. You do not look at the purported ages of several characters who many existed before history was being written down properly and were being recited via oral tradition. You do not use that as a method to determine the age of a planet. Anyway, the answer to this puzzle is quite complex. Some of the variety would have been carried by a pair of animals in the ark. When parents pass traits onto their offspring, these traits can appear in new combinations in the offspring. Natural selection can weed some existing traits out of a population. However, a close examination reveals that genetic changes have also arisen in this time. Many of these changes do not appear accidental, and do not directly cause disease. For this reason, some creationists have proposed God designing animals to be able to undergo genetic mutations which would enable them to adapt to a wide range of environmental challenges while minimizing risk. That is evolution! That is evolution, my friend. That's what that is. This thing that they just described is evolution, which is why their very next part is, isn't that evolution? It is important to recognize that biologists use several distinct definitions for evolution that are often blurred together as if they are synonymous. Okay. Evolution is sometimes defined as change in the genetic makeup or gene frequency of a population over time. Yeah, change in allele frequency over time. That is what evolution is. Like that is measured in mutations. That's what it is. This has been observed. Both creationists and evolutionists recognize this as an important in building models to help us understand what likely happened in the past. A second definition involves the idea that all life descended from a common ancestor. No, this is an extrapolation on the previous. The fact that we see a variety of changes in genetic makeup for populations over time, this literally explains how we get multiple organisms from a single type of organism. This isn't a second definition of evolution. This is wrapped up in the theory. This is part of the theory. This has not been observed. Well, of course it hasn't been observed. We don't have a time machine. In fact, it is in direct opposition to the testimony God gives us in the Bible. It doesn't matter. Literally. Okay, look. Look. There are people today who believe in evolution who are Christians because they understand that the science behind it is sound. But let me go ahead and be the edgy atheist here for just a minute. I will be the asshole for a second. The fact that your deity, whom in my perspective is fictional, says that I'm wrong, does not matter to me. I do not care if your variant of God thinks that something is A, B, or C, because in my eyes, the view of, in my estimation, a likely fictional character has no bearing on how I live my life and what scientific data says. Moreover, again, there are Christians who believe that evolution happened and who believe that the earliest written works in the Bible are very allegorical, and therefore evolution was the tool that God used to diversify life, and we accept, because God literally says that some of the parables that he engages with in the Bible are fictions, and he tells that to his disciples. They've taken that to say, okay, some of the things that are written as fact in the early books in the Bible are not necessarily fact, especially if we can observe them to not be true. Things like the global flood, which did not happen. The idea that all life has a common ancestor relies on the assumption that the Bible's history is false, and the assumption that changes which do occur could produce the variety of life we see today from a single-celled ancestor. So it's not really an assumption so much as it is we can literally track, with some gaps, but we can track going back the links in the chain leading to human ancestry as it is right now. If you want an example of this, I invite you to go study about nested hierarchies. Nested hierarchies are the things that let us see, okay, we are all eukaryotic organisms, and as we are eukaryotic organisms, but there are also eukaryotic organisms that have mammalian traits. We would call these mammals. They are still eukaryotes. These eukaryotic organisms that have mammalian traits can sometimes have simian traits, and then human-like traits. At no point did a human stop being a simian, did it stop being a mammal, did it stop being a eukaryote. we have very, very complex models that are easy enough to understand for how this diversification actually happened. It doesn't matter that your Bible's history says one thing. The only people that use this as a truism, as a truth mechanism, are people who already believe in the Bible. But the Bible's not a science book. The Bible is not going to tell me about genetic variants in allele frequencies. The Bible is not going to tell me about various principles in complex mathematics. The Bible is not going to tell me about where certain things are located in the solar system to the same level of degree that we can get through scientific methods, like using telescopes, like using microscopes, like using the tools that we've developed to do these things better than a several thousand-year-old book. What is he smoking? Jesus. He is smoking Jesus. He has Jesus in his mouth right now, and he's taking a big old hit. Oh, boy. So what else is in here? Let's see. So evidence of horizontal gene transfer. Okay, so the biblical... Let's see here. The biblical view explains an important paradox we see in the world around us. It anticipates the complexity that is constantly being uncovered by scientific research. Does it? Does it really? I don't think it does. See, here's the thing. Here's what Ken Ham and his crew think is anticipatory where the Bible's concerned. They feel as though when the Bible says something very vague that can somewhat be used to come to the conclusion that scientists have come to, that, oh, the Bible anticipated that. We already knew that. But if that was the case, scientific discovery wouldn't happen. There is literally nothing that could be discovered by scientists right now that wasn't already in the Bible. But for instance, there's a huge difference when the Bible says something like, oh, well, God stretched his hand across the cosmos. There's a difference between that statement and red and blue ships have been observed in the universe so that we can see that our galaxy is accelerating outward from a point of singularity, and all of existence that we can see are all expanding out towards an event horizon. That is a very different, more detailed explanation of what we have in the observable universe over a hand stretched out one side of the universe. If it can sound vaguely enough like it fits into something that we have discovered scientifically, then creationists will claim it as their own. Every time. Now, when it's a firmament Zeku, they will just say that that's the atmosphere. It's a constant goalpost move. Because a creationist will say that the firmament is the atmosphere, but a flat earther creationist will say the firmament is literally a dome, as described in the Bible. It depends on which creationist it is, and this is the other problem. Because these things are so vague, they fit into 1,000 different worldviews, and 1,000 different interpretations of this, many of which not backed up by science. The issue you run into with creationism, with young earth creationism, is that their interpretations of the Bible are post hoc. They are all post hoc rationalizations. They hear that the world is one thing, and then they look in their Bible for something that sounds vaguely enough like it, and then they say, the Bible explained it, and they do it post hoc. So the universe is expanding, thus God is a growing boy? No, God is dummy thick, and he can't hide in the bowels of heaven because the clap of his ass cheeks is too loud. So Satan hears him when he moves. That's what's happening. When you hear thunder, it is the clap of God's ass cheeks. Yes, yes, Love Raven official. Thunder is God's cheeks clapping. Don't ask what the rain is unless you're of a particular variety of kink. But with that said, that was frustrating enough for me. I want to know what you guys think. I want to know what your guys' thoughts are. My position is, I came into this expecting this to justify viruses existing, and really what most of it talked about is that, aha, evolution false. Haha, evolution false. Like, the whole fucking article is just evolution false. That's it. It didn't talk about why God made viruses. It just said, yeah, God probably made viruses for a reason. Evolution bad. And that's the whole fucking thing. But that's what is required to get into Ken Ham's circle and make an article for him. You just have to say evolution bad and then put any fucking title on it, and he'll accept it. And it's so frustrating that that's literally all it is. But, you know, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? I also think it was incredibly tone deaf to post this particular article again during a global pandemic. That's just me. With that said, if you enjoyed this content, let me know in the comment section below. If you have any criticisms, if you have any conversations you want to throw out there, conversations can be done in the comment section as well. If you want to support this channel and what I do, the best ways to do so are in the description below. Also, Joey Ravioli, thank you very much for the follow. Everybody, you should do exactly what Joey Ravioli has done, if I am saying it correctly. If I'm saying it incorrectly, please let me know. But you should definitely be doing that thing where you follow over on Twitch. That would be awesome. With that said, though, as always, everyone, insert end of video tagline here. Where I give real-life updates to what's going on behind the scenes on the channel, stuff that you don't really get over here, and even on Twitch. Patreon also helps the channel's stability a whole lot. Without Patreon, I wouldn't be able to do this at all. Especially with the kind of content that I do, neither YouTube nor Twitch are the most stable sources of income. If you are a $20 and up patron, then you will be featured on the ending slides, as shown in the beginning of the end credits. If you want to catch the streams where all this content comes from, then consider heading over to Twitch and following. And if you want to continue watching over here on YouTube, maybe consider clicking one of the end screen videos. And once again, I want to thank you so much for spending your time with me over on my channel. I wouldn't be able to do literally anything that I'm doing over here on YouTube without each and every one of you. So, thank you.